Hey there and welcome back to Mass Effect. My name is Pete and today we complete the second part of the Bring Down the Sky DLC. In the last episode we landed on Asteroid X57, which is still on straight collision course with the human colony of Terra Nova, thanks to the efforts of a group of Batarian terrorists. Those terrorists are using 3 large fusion torches to maneuver the asteroid, and it is up to us to shut those down. We already deactivated one in the last episode, so logically number 2 is up next. We have already been warned though that this fusion torch is surrounded by proximity mines, which of course only increases the challenge. This fusion torch is, just like the last one, surrounded by turrets, and also just like the last ones, these behave a bit differently. They have shields that go back up if we move too far away, so it is impossible to snipe the turrets from a distance. Instead, we have to get close. Also, despite already reaching level 50 in this playthrough, we will continue to take out all turrets on foot. I think we can use the added bit of challenge that provides. Now, thankfully, we don't have that large a number of turrets against us. The first facility, I think, had 6 or so. This one only has 3, so it's fairly manageable. It is a good idea to start with the one that we started with, since that is a bit more isolated, and then move on to these 2 right here and quickly take them out one after the other. And if you're wondering about the blasting caps, those are placed inside of this orange marked circle, and they can be navigated around on foot. However, only moving the Mako across this orange line will result in instant death. So with the Mako we are just allowed to navigate around the general area, while on foot we can and have to strategically evade the blasting caps themselves. And that is exactly what we're doing now. The small red meter on the lower right indicates how close we are to a proximity mine, but since we have fairly good visibility here, it's not too hard to avoid running into one. We can, however, not avoid running into another group of enemies here, and if you're now thinking that a firefight inside of an area plastered with blasting caps might not be the greatest idea, then I would of course have to agree. It is actually possible to use the blasting caps here as a tactical element, however that is most of the time more trouble than it's worth. Since the blasting caps are on the side of the facility that we come from, we would first have to go behind the enemies, and then use biotic abilities like throw or lift to push them back the other way. That is a risky strategy and not all that necessary, to be honest, despite the fact that we are facing a few high caliber enemies here. As long as we don't get hit by too many rockets, this fight isn't the hardest one in the world. In total, we only have 4 enemies against us, 2 normal Batarian troopers and 2 Batarian rocket troopers. They behave pretty much like all the other rocket troopers in the game, be it Geth or Mercenary, and generally speaking it's a good idea to not get into their line of fire. They appear to be a bit more flimsy than the normal Batarian troopers, however apparently they do have the exact same amount of health. So maybe that's just me. With all Batarian troopers defeated, we can now complete the Avoid the Blasting Caps assignment, simply by deactivating the blasting caps with this console over here. And that is the first of 3 assignments on the asteroid completed. Now it is time to disable the fusion torch, and for that we need to head inside. And the very first thing we need to do here is hit a lift on the Batarian engineer on top of the balcony. He is the one enemy in this facility that can cause huge problems for us. That is because he's frequently using sabotage, and so we definitely want to make use of his convenient positioning and take him out first. The Batarian trooper over here is next. Normally you can get him down easily after a throw, warp or neural shock. However, in our case he manages to get back up and activate both shield boost and immunity, and that makes the fight a bit harder than it needs to be. After taking him down, we want to head back to our starting position and move forward from there. The reasons for that are twofold. Number 1, this elevated platform over here gives us excellent cover. Number 2, we have a roof over our heads, and that is especially important because we have a few flying drones in the area. And those will have a much harder time hitting us if we're behind cover and they have no angle from above. The rest of the enemies in this area will be more Batarian troopers and more rocket drones, so at least we have some consistency there. Now, while the Batarian troopers move more or less at random, the drones actually have fixed patrol routes, so they always move along the same path. And while there are 6 of them in total, they will never engage all at once, and they will also all start on top of the balcony, so most of the time they are less of an issue than you might think. It's mostly only a matter of spotting them early, and then either getting quickly into cover or hitting them with sabotage. And we have now actually taken out everything but the drones, and right where we're standing is a great spot to pick them off one after the other. With a high level sabotage, the time it takes the next drone to reach this corner here should be enough for that ability to be cooled down again. So we could just stay here and wait, but of course if we want to take the fight to them, that's also fine. A good position for that are the elevated boxes here. From here we have at least some visibility onto the balcony. Alright, I think we're down to 2 drones now, so maybe we can try to get them both while they're still on the balcony. The pillars on the balcony, however, make that a bit tricky. Okay, it seems like the drone here has decided to fly into the usual position, so let's hit it with a sabotage and then disable it quickly. Then it's off to the last one. That one has already taken a few hits, so it should also fall rather quickly. Alright, now it's time to loot and then disable the fusion torch. In terms of loot, we have a crate right around the corner here, and then a bit more treasure in the room in the back. It is just one storage locker though. For the rest we need to go upstairs, just like in the first facility. By the way, you can also actually start looting when your enemies are down to only 1 drone, as that last drone will always stay on top of the balcony. Maybe it occasionally covers the staircase, but generally it does not come into the main area. Before we turn left to disable the fusion torches, let's first turn right for some more loot. We can find some weapons in a secure crate and then also some Medigel in the back. And now we can do what we came for and disable the second of 3 fusion torches.
Are you there? You've got to hurry. You really pissed them off. Their leader's setting charges everywhere. I think he's going to blow this whole facility.
Get away from there!
Don't shoot, please! No!
Who's shutting down the torches? I won't ask you again. Find this problem and deal with it. Get her out of here!
Well, he seems like a nice guy now, doesn't he? At least we now know who we're dealing with, and also that he seems very determined. That will of course not change our objective to stop him and eventually take him down, but as we just learned in the cutscene, somebody might get in our way first. Now, before we head out for facility number 3, we can do a bit of sightseeing. There is still the occasional point of interest left on the asteroid, and we also still have the missing engineers assignment to take care of. If you want to know what that is about, check out the previous episode. In short, lead engineer Simon Atwell is missing 3 of his engineers. We already found 2 of them dead in the last episode, so you can probably already imagine how number 3 is doing. Before we take care of that, however, there is another interesting location nearby, one that you will very likely not find unless you specifically look for it. That is because it's at a point on the map that you would normally never come close to. In my personal opinion, you're not missing out on much if you don't go here, but since this is a completionist playthrough, we will of course make a quick stop. Inside of the small container here, we can first find an aid station and then the station logs, which tells us that apparently there were some explosives stored here. However, they have been moved to a location nearby, and that sounds exactly like something that we should check out. Thankfully, after reading the station logs, the location has already been marked on the map, so we now only need to drive over there. And as you can see on the compass, that hiding spot is pretty much at the end of the map. And now why I think it's not all that important to go here, what we can find inside here are just grenades. And I personally don't use grenades all that often, and to add to that, there are just far more in here than you could ever carry. And we have already maxed out the grenade capacity. Inside here we can find a sweet 16 of them, so even though we can carry up to 10, and let's for a moment consider we would have entered here with all our grenades already spent, we would still leave with 6 that are absolutely useless. Now, one could argue that you can always come back to restock, but honestly, the location of this small shack is so inconvenient that I think it's hardly worth the effort. Anyway, enough rambling, we are now moving straight on to facility number 3, and while we do, we actually pass the location of the final fight on this asteroid, which is somewhat hinted at by the amount of red dots on the compass in the lower right corner. Of course, just like the previous two, this fusion torch is once again heavily guarded, as it is surrounded by the turrets that we're already very familiar with. To make things easier in a moment, we can just quickly step out of the Mako and already draw a gun, so that next time we exit the Mako we will already have it ready to fire. The turrets here are somewhat conveniently positioned, at least the first two. Number 1 can actually be taken out without a single other turret firing at us, which of course makes it our first prime target. Then I accidentally pressed the draw weapon button 1 times too many, and the whole squad put their weapons away. That of course makes a little preparation entirely useless, but at least it happened here where we're not in too much danger. The second turret is then also one that we can engage rather safely, as the other 4 are pretty far away still, and most of them don't even have a line of fire at us here. But with this one taken out, it now gets a bit tricky. I have actually tried this numerous times, but I never really found a way to approach from an angle where only a few of the turrets can hit us. So we will have to do this the hard way, and that is actually the way that gets recommended most of the time. Thanks to these turrets' rather slow projectiles, we can drive in a small circle that keeps us somewhat safe. Of course, it does complicate the whole firing thing for ourselves, but the Mako's main cannon still packs enough punch so that we only have to hit in the general area of a turret. Still, if you want to destroy the turrets on foot, you will have to stop and get out eventually, because even if you don't get hit, the Mako might catch 3 or 4 projectiles, so once you get back inside, the Mako might already be close to blowing up. Then, if you do get back inside safely, movement is key. As you can see here, I tried the rocking back and forth tactic, but right now the turrets have just too much firepower for that to work. So I caught a few well-deserved hits. I probably should have gone back to driving in a circle immediately after dispatching of the first turret. And here you can see the result of just a quick moment of carelessness. We still have 2 turrets left, and the Mako has already lost all of its shields and is now just 1 or 2 hits away from being completely destroyed. Thankfully, now however, rocking back and forth actually works, as the other turret can't hit us here. So with this one now taken care of, we can proceed to the last one, and since we don't have any ground troops coming up this time, this will also be the last thing that we have to do before we can go inside. Alright, the perimeter is clear, time to take care of the last fusion torch. Of course, and I think you expected this already, we will have another fight here. However, I actually think this is the easiest one. That is mostly thanks to the U-shaped layout of the facility, which pretty much divides things up into 2 areas that we can tackle one after the other. Additionally, the enemies here don't pose too much of a threat. The war beast here occasionally rushes us, but if we stay inside the entrance area for a few moments, we can generally take it out before it reaches us. A second one will then shortly be released, but by the time it makes it around the corner, we will already have dealt with a few enemies already. In this first bit, the Batarians are all the standard Batarian troopers, so we don't have the risk of our weapons overheating or someone hitting us with biotic abilities. One last trooper now stands between us and the second half of the area, so let's quickly hit him with lift and get rid of him. We can then move up a bit. A third and fourth war beast will come around the corner soon, but they normally arrive with a bit of a delay, and even if they came rushing in closely together, they're not that tough. With the two of them taken out, we can now turn the corner, get into cover, and then engage again. The second half has 3 more enemies, among them a shock trooper, and if we can, that is also the enemy that we want to take out first, simply because with access to warp and throw, he can be a bit annoying. The other two are then standard shock troopers who really don't stand much of a chance, so I think it's safe to leave cover now and rush in. After all, we have the numbers advantage for once. And that's it, area cleared, we now have access to the third fusion torch, but before we deactivate that, let's help ourselves to a few things. At the end here, we once again have a small separated room, inside a grenade storage box, but we hardly need those. Definitely more of interest is the storage locker over here. And those are not necessarily the greatest weapons, but still they will help us make a bit of money. To shut down the third and final fusion torch, we now once again need to head upstairs. By the way, I find the layers of these facilities really refreshing. While the overall model that is used for these facilities is of course always the same, the interior is vastly different for all 3 fusion torches, and combined with the different outside areas as well, that makes them all really unique. And that uniqueness is something that goes missing a bit in the main game, at least if you do a bunch of the side quests one after another. And here we are, a third fusion torch disabled. A bit anticlimactic maybe, but we just avoided a potentially huge disaster. With all 3 fusion torches shut down, the asteroid will now hopefully no longer collide with Terra Nova, and we can focus our attention on our Batarian friends.
Hold it right there. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed.
However, it looks like they are the first ones to make a move.
Don't come any closer. We can do this the hard way, or we can end this peacefully.
Yeah, the peaceful way does not seem to be a strong suit lately.
I've got nothing to say to a Batarian terrorist.
Look, I'm just doing my job here. Hijacking this rock wasn't my idea. I signed on to make a little profit. A quick slave grab, nothing more.
Seems like things got a bit out of hand, wouldn't you say?
This isn't just a slave grab anymore. Millions of people are gonna die.
Don't you think I know that? I'm just following orders here. If it were up to me, we'd have already left.
Well, then how about you make your own decisions for a change?
Well, it's not too late. You can still leave.
I don't think so. Balak would skin me alive and sell my hide out of spite. Crazy bastard. This whole mission's gone to hell and I'm gonna pay for it.
Yep, I am inclined to agree to that.
You keep listening to this Balak and you'll end up dead.
Maybe. I had a bad feeling about this from the moment we landed. Now Balak wants you dead. And what Balak wants, Balak gets. I can't change that.
Okay, now we have the option here to talk him out of a fight. After all, he at least seems to be regretting his decisions. However, there are 2 things that make this a hard path to follow for me. Number 1, a fight here would give us renegade points, and we still desperately need a few of those. Number 2, letting him walk without a fight would mean letting him walk without any punishment whatsoever. And even though he might not have intended for all this to happen, it still happened, he was heavily involved, and he should therefore face the consequences. So Charn, I'm sorry, but you're not getting out of here alive.
But I can.
Damn it. Get him! No one leaves!
Alright, quick enemy overview here. Apart from Charn, we also face a number of Batarian troopers, 7 of them to be exact. Added to them are 2 shock troopers, 1 sniper and 1 engineer, as well as a total of 6 Batarian war beasts. Now luckily not all those enemies will engage at once, still this is a moderately tough fight, which is also the reason why we begin it with a small retreat. If we had not made it to level 50 yet, this fight will also be a nice source of experience points, another reason to engage in it. And I actually want to quickly talk about those reasons to engage in this fight, and to some extent that is actually a discussion about the morality system in Bring Down the Sky. Now, most of the time in the base game, the Paragon choices are the good choices. However, most of the time they are also the ones that make more sense, and the ones that generally give you the best possible outcome to a situation. The renegade choices, however, range from amusingly evil to borderline psychopath. However, they are very rarely choices that can actually be justified, unless your reason is to specifically go for renegade points. And this is why I love the choices in Bring Down the Sky so much. Of course, we could have taken the moral high ground here and let Shawn walk. And to be honest, the whole Paragon Renegade points discussion aside, there are some good arguments for that. However, in my opinion, there are equally good arguments to be made for the Renegade choice. For example, Charn's argument that this was just a simple slave grab. Yeah, isn't that bad enough as it is? Is the fact that you just wanted to grab a few human slaves really reason enough to let you walk? Because I think for that alone he should face consequences. And that's not even mentioning the fact that Charn might have tried to manipulate us here. After all, he just saw us pretty much eliminate his entire crew. Maybe he had hoped for a fight against the wounded and weakened Shepard, and what he got instead was level 50 Shepard at full strength with 2 biotics to back him up. And it's not hard to see why a guy in that situation might make up a lie to escape with his life. What I'm trying to say really is that Bring Down the Sky makes choices mean something. And not necessarily because of their consequences, because, spoiler alert, in the grand scheme of things, whether or not we fight Charn here really makes not much of a difference, but it makes choices mean something because we actually have to think. When I'm presented with a Paragon Renegade choice, and the Paragon choice is obviously the better move, and on top of that the Renegade choice is something that a sane human being would hardly be able to live with, that takes the entire meaning out of making choices. Here you have compelling arguments for both sides, and I think that makes making choices so much more worthwhile. By the way, this is something I think BioWare mastered in the Knights of the Old Republic games. Especially in the second one, really early on you have a few moments where you think, well, this is obviously the better choice. And then you see that being a goody two-shoes is not always the best way to go about things. In Mass Effect, on the other hand, and that would probably be one of my main criticisms with the game, you can most of the time run around being the friendly human savior and generally also get the best possible results out of that. I like the fact that this rewards players who want to play morally good, but I also think to some extent that it fails to portray the fact that war is sometimes a dirty business. Now, I think it's about time we get back to the fight at hand. We have the majority of enemies already eliminated, that includes Charn himself, however this small group in the back still presents us with a bit of resistance. I like the sniper rifle for the second half of the fight, mostly because these few enemies here don't really move around much, and once their engineer is down we also lose the risk of anybody hitting us with sabotage. And now the room is cleared, and that means it's time for our reward, a reward that Charn would have been able to give us the peaceful way as well, but let's not get back into that discussion. From Charn's dead body we are able to retrieve a keycard, and that keycard gives us access to the facility where Balak is hiding. And that facility and Balak as well will be our targets for the next episode. For today we will make the cut here. I apologize that this episode went up a bit late, it was a bit of a stressful week. As always, hit the thumbs up button if you liked this episode, check out the rest of the playlist in case you missed an episode, and I can say thank you all for watching and I'll see you next time. Cheers!